and guns. And frankly, the kinds of stuff that's out there is mostly not true, and mostly name-calling and mostly blaming. And I'm so proud to be able to welcome our new collaborators. I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about Walk the Talk America, the organization that they have founded and that they've reached out to MHA about. And what I hope will happen here today is that we're going to talk. We're going to really face some of the hard things. We're going to address the fact that there's misperceptions all around, that there's misperceptions that people who work in advocacy always want to take people's guns away, people who are gun owners always want to blame mental illness, and people with mental health conditions, and we certainly hear it out of the mouths of the politicians. And that's not where everybody is. And if we don't start talking to each other and talking about ways that we can save lives, that we can do harm reduction. Mental Health America is about helping people live healthier lives. You all know all of our talking points. And one of the things that can keep people healthier is reducing the suicide rate in this country. We saw the CDC report last week where the rates are climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. How do we help keep people safer? Well, we talk to the industry folks who are in the industry that has the most lethal means. That doesn't mean we take everybody's guns in the country. That's not what we're saying. I'm from Pennsylvania. I know that on the first day of deer hunting season, the schools are closed because it's important. And it's important that we recognize that, and we have never, ever taken a position that we're saying we need to take people's guns away, we need to lock people's guns up. I know very early in my career, when I was in Philly, when I first met Todd, I remember the first time a reporter called me up to offer comments about restricting people's rights to own guns because they might have once been a suicidal teenager, and I got up on my soapbox and I got really angry and I said, oh my gosh, I just defended people's rights to own guns. Well, exactly. That's what we have. We're Americans. We have those rights. And we're not going to take them away from people because of those things. We're going to look together at what are the issues, the real issues, not the make-believe issues, not the myths, and not the name-calling. And with that, I want to invite my friend Mike Sodini up here and my friend Rob Pincus.
Thanks, Debbie. I think I'm going to stand for a little while. We might end up sitting down. Does that work? That's Mike. I'm Rob. I'm an educator. People, like, I'm sitting on a plane, so what do you do? I'm like, I'm a gun guy. Like, here we're the gun guys, but primarily I'm in education. So I teach gun use, defensive gun use, all kinds of personal defense, work with military law enforcement historically, and since what I consider the revolution of concealed carry expansion to be with the shall issue laws and the fact that now in 50 states and Washington, D.C. people can get concealed carry permits. Over my lifetime in this industry, 30 years as an active shooter, over 20 years full-time in the industry, and a full-time educator since 2001, we've gone from 2 million people who can legally carry guns concealed for personal defense in the country, less than that really, in over a dozen states where you couldn't get a permit, to now there's 13 states where you can carry a gun, you don't need a permit, and there's over 30 million people who can legally carry a concealed gun. There's more guns in the country, there's more gun owners in the country, there's more average guns per gun owner in households with guns, and there's a lot of talk about gun control. We talk about gun rights, usually on our side. We're both talking about gun responsibility, and I think that's really important to get into. Like I said, I'm an educator. Not a mental health professional, but I have to study adult learning. I have to study the way the brain works, physical motor skill development, and conceptual learning as well. So I'm going to ask you guys to do something for me. I want you to write some stuff down. I want you to pick up the pens and paper that were provided. If you're taking digital notes, that's fine. If you're updating your Facebook status, at least humor me and pretend you're taking notes on your phone. And I want you to write down, guns can be dangerous. Establish some gun facts. You're not writing anything down. Guns can be dangerous. I want you to write down that guns, this one's gonna be long, I'm gonna give you in parts. Guns are the only physical item guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. And then I want you to write down, freedom isn't safe. Freedom isn't safe. So if we take those three things, that's the issue, right? That's why we need gun responsibility. So I teach gun responsibility to people from the level of unauthorized access issues with kids in the house and which end the bullet comes out of because they're a new gun owner, in the schools, adults coming to guns that didn't grow up with guns, people who are complacent because they grew up with guns, all that stuff. But when it comes to the mental health side and suicide prevention, we're talking about access control, we're talking about negligence in use, we're talking about outreach inside of the firearms community, and that's how we end up here today. So we end up here today because Mike came to me in June and a couple other people who are leaders in the firearms industry and said, we need to do more. We need to do more than just talk about this, and that's where Walk the Talk America came from. We need to do more than just point fingers and say it's mental health, because that's been really popular in the last few years in the gun rights side, on the gun pro-gun side, to be able to say, well, yeah, a school got shot up, but it's not the gun, it's the person, and that person is mentally ill. That person needs to be helped over there. And a lot of people want to say, not necessarily in this room, but a lot of people want to say from all walks of life in the United States, it's the guns, or it's the gun owners that don't care about our kids, or don't care about our communities, or don't care about the danger of guns, and that's just simply not true. So it's important to acknowledge that guns can be dangerous. It's important to acknowledge that there's a thing such as gun responsibility that we need to put with those rights, right? Now, I had you write something down about the Bill of Rights because it is important that the backdrop and the foundation and the umbrella, and however you want to phrase it, of any conversation about gun responsibility or gun control has to be framed by the Bill of Rights saying that our right to keep and bear arms is guaranteed, and the current and for decades opinion of the Supreme Court of the United States that that is an individual right. So I know there are people who would rather say, well, it's not, or it's militia, or it's not for individuals, or that doesn't mean AR-15s. Yes, it does. And are there reasonable restrictions on any rights? Can rights be infringed? Sure. We take away people's right to speak when that speech harms people. We take away people's freedom of movement. We put them in jail. We take away people's life. We have the death penalty in this country. So can we take away people's right to keep and bear arms? Absolutely. One of my friends from the pro-gun control side articulated to me something really important. One of his frustrations with the pro-gun control side is this thing like magazine capacity, assault weapons bans, this kind of thing. Things that are designed by policy to take away a certain type of gun or an accessory from everybody. Which really doesn't solve the problem, right? Especially when we're talking about suicide prevention, where the single shot breech opening shotgun can help someone complete a suicide, as well as the AR-15 with 30 rounds and the red dot lasers and all that stuff, right? So we don't want to take some guns away from everybody. We want to take all guns away from a very small group of people who are dangerous to themselves or others. Talk about firearms violence. We know that suicide is the #1 way that people get hurt by firearms, right? You take suicides away and that number drops dramatically, 60% by some statistics, 80% by some statistics. There are statistics out there that tell you that the likelihood of suicide completion goes up if you have firearms in your home. The likelihood of suicide attempts go up if you have firearms in your home. But there's other correlations like what kind of people have firearms in their home. The kind of people who are self-reliant, who don't want to ask for help, the kind of people who want to solve their own problems. Maybe there's some people who have mistrusts of other people or of strangers that are the types of people that also are the types of people that want to have firearms for personal defense inside of their home. So there's a correlation. Rural America, where there isn't, you guys have talked about it this morning, rural America, where there isn't a lot of mental health care availability, there isn't a lot of conversation about mental health assistance, there isn't a lot of outreach, there isn't a lot of fighting in the open being done, there isn't a lot of before stage 4 being done. That's where a lot of guns are. So for me, it's really important that we acknowledge a couple of things before we get the conversation started, which I really want this to be a conversation in Q&A about the realities of our laws, the realities of this being a civil right, the acknowledgement from the gun guys that guns can be dangerous and we need to exercise responsibility with our rights, and then asking you guys for help. one of those things is the outreach, making it okay, ending the stigma, right? So I was talking to a couple people during the break earlier, and it's, I think mental health professionals, people that are savvy in the mental health world would point out that 0.000 some percent of people with any kind of diagnosed disorder are actually dangerous to themselves or others, right? We would point out that 0.000 some percent of gun owners are dangers to others or themselves. 0.00% of legally owned guns are threatening or used in violence against other people. It's an incredibly small number. So there's the stigma on both sides. I think that's what came from Position 72. That's what came from Mike talking to Debbie. Then Debbie came out to Colorado and met with us in August, and we formally kind of went public. Mike gave his first presentation on what Walk the Talk America was in August, I think it was August 25th or 26th, at a Guns for Everyone diversity event where we talked about issues like, we were in Colorado, we talked about the issues of guns and marijuana. We talked, right now you have to choose. Do you want to own guns, or do you want to have marijuana in the states where it's legal as recreational use? You can't do both. The federal government has said you cannot legally purchase or own a gun. Concealed carry permits are taken away if you get a medical marijuana card. There's a lot of issues there. One of the other issues we talked about was mental health outreach and raising awareness, making it okay to ask for help, ending the fear-mongering kind of that's happened and continues to be done by some organizations in the gun world that would imply that if you raise your hand and ask for help, you're going to get your guns taken away forever.